Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and in this video we're going to be using Dreamweaver and introduce a couple new elements. The link element, a URL link, it's called an A tag or an anchor tag, and also the image element. What would the web be without images? I don't know, probably boring. We're going to do those, and we're going to put some text in and modify some text as well. And we're going to make a little bit more complex of a page than we have in our previous example, but still not too difficult yet. So I have my page created and I don't have any content in here yet. I just have a blank page. And I have my Dreamweaver view and split view so that you can see both the layout and also the code view. And I also have this in design mode. You can switch back and forth between live mode and design mode. Sometimes we will need to, but I think for this video's purposes, we can stay in design mode for the entirety of it. So let's go ahead and get some content. We're going to copy and paste some content from outside of Dreamweaver and put it in here. And so I'm going to use the first little bit of the Declaration of Independence. All right. No arguments here, I'm sure. Paste that in there, and we can see that we did get a little bit of formatting already. We got some structural formatting. We didn't get any styling. All right. The source material didn't really have much in the way of styling, but we got no styling whatsoever. We only have some formatting. Right, so we have paragraphs for each of the paragraphs, and we have bold or strong for these bolded parts. We are going to keep the bolded parts bolded, but we're going to do it in our own way. So I'm going to come into the code and just delete the strong elements. I'm just going to highlight and delete these. Right, that's kind of the easiest way to do that. And then click back into here and you'll see that's been updated. This first part that's a paragraph, we can click in here, and if we right click, we have some options here, and one of these options is the paragraph format. We could turn it into a list if we wanted to. All right, we could do some changes here, but the change that I'm looking for is I'm going to change this to an H1 tag. All right. Let's see that again. Paragraph format. And the paragraph formats that I can change to are a paragraph, any of the H tags, or pre-formatted text. Pre-formatted text is great if you need to show some code actually in your page. It's going to hold on to those spaces and line breaks and show you every single one of those. The default in HTML is if you have more than one space, it's visibly not going to show more than one space in a row. It's only going to show one space at a time. So for some of you, you may have a habit of putting two spaces at the end of a sentence. If you do that in HTML, you're only ever going to see one anyway, unless you specifically code that second space, which in my opinion is kind of a lot of work for just a space. We can see that from our source material, we actually do have a few spots where there's three spaces, but visibly, if I highlight one and show it in the code, there's only going to be one space actually in that HTML. So we're going to make this first part an H1 tag. All right. Could actually make this an H2 tag, because an H1 should really be the title of the page. This is the title of the section of the page. Our page is only going to be part of a page anyway. And then this first line up until the first comma, and I'm going to do the second line up until the first comma as well. We want to give that some special style. I didn't want to just leave the strong in there. I wanted to give it even more style. And so what I'm going to do instead is add a span around it. I'll show you how to do that. Again, I'm going to highlight and right click. The previous one, because I did this format, I can right click and change the previous one. I don't want to do that to the second one because, as you'll see, even though I've only highlighted up until this first comma, if you change it, it's actually going to change the entire element. And that's not what I want to do this time. This time, I just want to wrap a tag around the highlighted spot. So I'm going to right click and choose wrap tag. And I can put any tag I want. I get this long list of things that I actually wouldn't even dream of doing. There's a lot of stuff, some things that I don't even use. I didn't even, maybe never even heard of a couple of these things. There's a lot of options. But we're going to do a span. And you can type it in, or you can scroll all the way down to the S's and click on it, hit enter, enter twice, once to kind of get your selection and then once to finalize. Right? Now we can see in our code that we have a span wrapped around the beginning and the end of our highlighted text. We can do the same thing to this piece of text down here. Right click, wrap tag. I'm just going to type in span because I think that's quicker than scrolling all the way down. You can do whichever one you like. Now, once I'm here, I can click on span. I'm going to click on the code part of span, make sure that I've highlighted span, and I can go open up my properties panel. And normally we just see this. We don't always get this HTML and CSS option. Properties panel is very content aware. Depending on what element you have currently selected, the properties panel is going to show you different properties. So sometimes we don't get to see this HTML and CSS selection, but this time we do, and that's because we can make that change. So we're going to make a new inline style. I'm going to click edit rule, right? And what that does is actually give me a little bit of style down here. We didn't actually create any style, but now we have a place to put an inline style. As the name suggests, an inline style is written directly in line in the code. Right? And this piece of style is only going to affect that one element where the span is, right? So I can write whatever style I want. I don't have to put selectors. In fact, I can't put selectors. Because the selector for that style is the element itself. So this is going to be a style just for this one element. So now that I've clicked edit rule, which is basically create rule, I can go to the CSS designer. Right? Make sure that you select between this all and current. Select current, which, as the tooltip shows, is going to switch to the current selection mode, right? This is going to allow you to make a style, an inline style for the span element. And you can check down here, make sure that that's right there, right? And check right down here, right? You may have all selected at the top of your CSS designer, and then you'll have trouble. You won't be able to find where to put your style. You could add a source. We're not doing that right now. We're doing its inline style right to the element. Right? So make sure you select current. If you can't see your properties over here, make sure you uncheck show set. Show set will show you only the styles that you have already set, or the properties that you've already set. So what we're going to do, just some simple styling for this, we're going to do the font style of italic. Right, we have normal, italic, and oblique. I'm going to choose italic. And then we're going to choose a font weight of bold. Normally, I like to go by the numbers. 400 is normal font weight. 600 is bold. Generally speaking, those are the weights. But some fonts will have some other weights, or you can just go by the keywords normal, bold, bolder, or lighter. So I'm going to choose bold, so italic and bold. And you'll see this is italic and bold. And now I'm going to click on this next one. There we go. So you can click on this element, and you'll see that span, my cursor is in the span, or I can click the span way down at the bottom and I can actually highlight the span. Let's see if we can set the style without having to fully highlight it. Let's go to properties, and edit rule, right? And we don't actually have to highlight the whole thing. That is convenient because it's not always that easy to highlight the entire span. Sometimes Dreamweaver does give us a little bit of difficulty with selecting things. So we can do that, and we can go into the designer. Again, make sure that you have the current button pressed at the top. You can double check on the left here to make sure that you're doing an inline style for that span element. And then again, we're going to do the same thing on this one. We're going to do italic and bold. And I'm going to do a quick save. And I have my page open right here. Whoops. That's what we're going to make it look like. So here's my page. I don't have an image in here yet. We have just the text. Okay, so I'm going to put my cursor down at the bottom. And there is an image provided here, which I have already clicked on to show the full image. And so this image already exists at archives.gov. It's at it's a different website than mine. And if I come into Dreamweaver and I want to insert, right, click on insert. If I want to insert an image, it's actually going to say, hey, which file do you want to insert? Well, I don't have this file. It's hosted on the internet. So what I can do instead is actually just a drag and drop. So I'm going to grab this, click and drag, don't let go, drag it all the way over to Dreamweaver, and then put it into my page. Okay? And it's going to take care of that. We can have a look at the code down here. IMG element, that's an image. SRC, that's short for source. The source of this image, if it was our own image and it existed on our website in the directory somewhere, what you would find here is our website directory, right? It doesn't exist on our website, it exists at archives.gov. So we have the full website and directory and file name of where it exists there at archive.gov. And this is how all images work on the internet. You can put that full URL of where the image exists, and technically it doesn't really matter if it exists on your website or on somebody else's website. You can just bring it in and put it in there. I will warn you, be careful of using someone else's image, especially be careful of using someone else's image directly off of their website. If it's their image on their website and you put the image onto your website, it still exists on their website. So they could actually change that image or delete that image. They don't have to tell you about it, and then that will break your website. There were some famous examples of this from, I won't name any names, but there was a news station that used somebody else's image and they directly linked it without even asking. And that person, who was a web comic, decided to change the images to say, hey, you use this image without permission. And it was live on their website. It says this image was basically stolen, and it took them a little while to update it. And in the meantime, everybody saw their poor move there. So be careful using somebody else's image. I'm taking this one directly from the government. I pay my taxes. I can use that. I own that image, right? I pay my taxes. So I'm going to use that from there. And then we have this alt. What you put in the alt value, ALT, this is alternative or alternate. If somebody is using if they're not displaying images, maybe they have a browser that's not, they have images turned off, or they have a browser that doesn't display images, or the image just simply doesn't load for some reason. This is what's going to display in its place, an alternate piece of text to display when the image doesn't display. And that could be for any reason. And so this alternate piece of text, it's just the URL for it. You can change it to be whatever you want it to be. So I can click on this. I could change it in the code, or just click on properties and this is the alt box right here. We can say whatever we want it to say. So I'm going to delete part of the file name on there and just have the last bit of the file name as the alt, just to save myself some typing. Also, we can do this link. I don't want to make this image a link only because it causes trouble for this particular example. But if I wanted to make this image a link, though, we could just type in a URL right there and it would link. Right? So there's the source, there's the link. We can add some other stuff. We can add a width and a height, which is always good for images to add a width and a height, especially with some new changes that Google is making for search engine optimization. If your images don't have a width and a height, what happens is your browser doesn't know how big the image is until after it's finished downloading it. That's just the nature of images. Your browser won't know the size of it until it's finished. And if the image is a large enough image that takes a moment to download, let's say it takes 2 seconds to download. For those 2 seconds, the image is not going to fit in the page properly. It's going to be just this little icon. Then when it downloads, it's going to pop into place and it's going to cause a shift. And you've probably seen that shift on websites before. You load up a website, and then about 2 seconds after it loads, some of the content shifts around. Oftentimes that's because of images. There are other things that could shift it, some JavaScript type things as well. So there are things that could shift it outside of images. Images are a big factor in that. Worst case scenario is when that shift happens, you're just about to click a link and then the shift happened and you accidentally clicked a different link and now you went somewhere else. That's the worst case scenario. Upcoming changes to Google have said that if you have big content shifts, they're actually going to lower your page rankings. So if you care about page rankings, then you're going to want to properly set your width and height of your images. That's a big deal. Okay? For this example, I don't care about search engine optimization, so I'm not going to bother setting it. If I did, I could set it right here. I am going to set my width and height in a different spot though. So I'm not going to set it directly on here. If you set it directly to the image also, it's going to be set just like this source and this alt in the code. That's where it's going to be set. That's not where I want it to be set though. Not like that. I don't want it to be set as a direct attribute. I do want to set it, but I want to set it in the style. So I have the properties taken care of here. Let's save and have a quick look at our page as it is so far. All right, so I have the picture of the actual document and then some of the text at the top, not all of it, up until they start talking about King George. That's how much I've got on there. We're going to take this image and kind of push it off to one side, and we'll see how we do that as well. All right, and we're also going to link up here. We have a couple of things to do before we finish this example. So let's take this image and come into CSS Designer. It's not going to give me the currently selected object this time, and that's okay. I'm going to add a new source, and I'm going to define in page. I'm not creating new files yet. So now I'm going to do an image style. So all the images on the page, I only have one. All the images on the page are going to get this style, and my style is that I'm actually going to use float, right? And you like to see what float does. So I'm going to do a float right. And let's take a quick look at what that does right away. It's just going to actually float it. It kind of takes it partway out of the regular flow of the document, pushes it off to the right. Now, what's really nice about floating elements, they work really well with images. What I'm going to do is actually click this image, and then I'm going to drag and move it right to the beginning of this actually right to the end of this H1, right? And then you'll see that it's floated to the right, and then all my text wraps around it automatically. But you'll notice that when I dragged it and I put my cursor right at the end of this H1 at the top, what it did is it actually put it inside. Oh, it's an H2. It actually put it inside that H2. I don't want it to be inside of that. So I need to drag below that, and I'll put it in front of the first paragraph, right? So it's also going to be inside that paragraph. Ooh, it's also inside the span. That's okay. We'll have it inside the span. We could finagle, we could mess around with the code if we wanted to. I could drag the code itself, right here. And once it's highlighted, I could just drag that and drop that down there. But you'll notice that now that it's no longer inside the H2, it's the top of this image is actually in line, right across the top. It's actually in line with the top of the text of the paragraph, which is exactly where I really want it to be. So let's save that, have a look at it in our browser. And there that is. We want to mess around with the size of it though, because we don't want the image to take up so much room, where on smaller screens, see what this is what's going to happen on smaller and smaller screens is it's not going to fit right. So we do want to fix that. So let's go to our CSS designer, click on our image, and we have some other layout things to work with. We can give it a width. All right, let's give it a percentage width. Call that 25%. Right? I don't know if you can read that, but that's 25% width. Right? And let's save that. It did make it very small over here. Let's see what it looks like in our browser. 25% of the width of the page. Okay. So as it gets smaller, all right, maybe that's the wrong choice as well, right? Because on small screens, it's going to be really, really small. And on big screens, it's going to get bigger. We do have other options. I'm going to leave that 25% width. But we actually have also a min width and a max width. So let's give it a minimum width so that on small screens will be 25%, but 25% down to a minimum of, let's say, 200 pixels wide. Okay, so now our image will never shrink smaller than 200 pixels. And if I click on my image and I see my code down here, as I shrink up my screen, you'll see that it never does get smaller than 200 pixels, which is pretty good. So on a phone that is maybe 400 or so pixels wide, it will be halfway. That's okay. All right, and then something we also want to do is make sure that it doesn't get too large on large screens as well. And so let's give that a max width of, let's say, 400 pixels is the maximum width. Okay, 400 pixel max width, 200 pixel minimum width, and it's going to be 25% of the available width, but that 25% is going to have an upper and a lower limit. We can do this on more than just images as well. We can do this on a lot of other elements. Very, very useful. Now let's go down and style this just a little bit. I'm not going to give it a border. I'm going to give it a box shadow. You may have seen shadows on things before. I'm going to give it a really big shadow so we can see what it looks like. And then we'll make that shadow look a little bit more presentable, right? So first we're going to make the shadow 0 pixels in the horizontal and vertical direction. And what this first two numbers do is they shift the shadow horizontally or vertically, right? So if you do 0 pixels for both of these, it's going to shift that shadow by nothing, and you'll have a perfectly centered shadow all the way around, governed by, of course, how blurry it is. So how blurry it is, if I do a 0 pixel blur, I'm going to have a very sharp edge on that shadow, a very well-defined shadow. And then if I do a 0 pixel spread, 0 pixel spread, then I'm going to have a shadow that does not spread at all away from the object. And then I'll give it a color. Black is a good color for a shadow. Come on, actually give me the color. There we go. All right, and then I could choose to have that shadow be an inset shadow. I'm not going to. So now I have, oops, let's show set. All right, I have 0 in the horizontal, 0 in the vertical, 0 blur, very crisp, and 0 spread. So if I save this, we shouldn't see the shadow at all. And if I refresh, and I don't see that shadow at all. So I have everything set to 0, so I can't actually see the shadow. It's there. It's behind the image entirely. So let's come back in and give these some value. Let's start with the spread and do a 3 pixel spread. Okay, and save that. There, now I have a 3 pixel spread of a very crisp shadow, and it looks like a border. That's because it's very, very crisp, and we did not move it at all. So this is a shadow. The other thing that's different between a shadow and a border is a border will actually take up space around the element. Shadows don't take up any layout space at all. They're just shadows, and they're actually behind the element. They're not behind all the elements. They're only behind this one element. Okay, so now we have that. Let's do some blur. Let's make it like a 5 pixel blur. Save that and refresh. All right, now it actually does kind of look like a shadow. It's a bit of an ugly shadow because it's, it's totally centered and it's kind of big. So now we can fine tune it, make it look like a normal image shadow now that you've seen what it looks like. Let me come back over here. All right, go ahead and pause the video and have a clear look at that, however you want to see that. Okay. And then let's change up the shadow. Let's give it a little bit of a horizontal motion. Let's do 2 pixels horizontal. And forgive me while I'm clicking in here. I do have a lot of trouble clicking in here in CSS Designer. All right, 2 pixels on the horizontal and vertical. So it's going to move 2 pixels over to the right and 2 pixels down. And then I'm going to do my spread also of 2 pixels. And I'm going to leave my blur of 5 pixels. So what should happen is 2 pixels over, 2 pixels down, 2 pixels spread, and then 5 pixels blurry. Let's have a look at that. There we go. Looks like a pretty decent shadow. We can put somewhat transparent colors on there to lighten up the color of the shadow, but I'm going to leave that for now. That's a pretty good shadow. So we have this image, very nice. We've floated it off to the right. We've given it a percentage width along with a minimum and a maximum width, and then we gave it a shadow. Ideally, if our image were a transparent PNG, these crisp edges would be transparent, and then our shadow could be a little bit better looking. It would still be square like it is, but we wouldn't have this funny edge right here. That's okay. It's just an example, right? Next thing we're going to do is make this a link. Right? So I click on properties of that, and I'm at the CSS part of the properties. Let's go to the HTML. I can make it a link. What I'm going to link it to is the page where it came from. So I'm going to copy this URL right here, reopen my properties, and put that link right there. Right. Oh. Press enter. There we go. Why is this not working? Let's click on the whole H2 before I do it. There we go. Had to click on the entire text for that link. You'll see what I did the first time is I just kind of put my cursor there, and you can't make a link with no text inside of it. So I had to come in and click, highlight some text, and then I can actually put a link in there. Okay. Something that we also want to do, we put that link in there, but we want to change the target of the link, right? And we want that target, we have some options. Default is don't make any changes. When somebody clicks this link, it changes our page into that new page. This is how most of your links are going to be. If they're links to your own website, you should not open a new tab. You should load it in the current tab or the current page. That's the way it should be. If your link goes to somebody else's website, standard practice is you set this to blank, which will be a new blank tab, and it will open in a new tab and leave the current tab open. That's the standard practice. It is changing a little bit because people do get a little bit unhappy when they have a lot of tabs open on their phone. So that standard is kind of changing, but still the standard. If you open up and if you go to a link outside of your website, you do it in a new tab, and that leaves your website still open. Right? In either case, even if you don't open a new tab, users can still hit the back button and go back to where they came from. Right? The other options we will talk about in a later video. We're going to set this one to blank because we want, when somebody clicks on that link, we want to open a new tab and leave our tab still open. Something else we didn't do yet is we didn't name our document. We didn't give it a title. So I'm just going to title it Declaration of Independence. And you can click anywhere in the page, click Properties, and you have Document Title. I'll paste Declaration of Independence, remove those hyphens and put spaces in there. I copied and pasted because I don't want to misspell Declaration of Independence. It's kind of important, and it's a big word. I might misspell it, right? It's very important that if you're putting documents on the internet, you don't misspell things, especially important words, right? So even if you trust your spelling, and I don't trust mine, I have a lot of typos, even when I know how to spell things. Oops. And so copy and paste is going to be your friend, right? Don't misspell things and put them live on the internet. So now we have a link here. If I click that, it opens up this page for the National Archives, shows us the full text of the Declaration of Independence, right? There's a lot more text. We only copied just the beginning, first couple of paragraphs, right? The image, I did not make a link just for simplicity's sake on our page. I didn't want to make that a link. But I do want to add some color to the background of our page, something I've been doing in all the examples so far. If you're using Firefox, there is a tool, right? In my toolbar, I have this open, this option open, the web developer tools. in your toolbar, you might not have it, and you'll have to find it in more tools, right? Go to the menu, go to more tools, and Eyedropper is the tool we're looking for, right? Eyedropper. And what that does is it opens up this cool eyedropper, and you can do this on any website in the world, and you can get a particular color from that page. The reason you can do this is because your browser, having displayed everything on the page, it knows what every color is. It's built into Firefox. I don't believe it's built into Chrome, but I'm going to grab an image, one of the lighter colors from this document right here, and use that color in my CSS designer to set the background color for the page. Now, just for the body, the entire page, right, I'm going to do an add property from here. As I type, I can see some drop-down options. Oop. CSS Designer does not like me when I click around things, but there we go. All right, background color. I pasted this hexadecimal value in there. All right, if you can't read it, it's okay. The color itself is not that important. I just grabbed it from our document there to kind of match the document, but there we go. Let's have a quick look at what we've done. All right, we copied and pasted all of our text in here, and Dreamweaver was kind enough to give us most of the formatting and none of the styling, which is good because we didn't want to bring any of that styling over. We wanted to do our own styling. Then we brought that image in, and we have a couple of options for bringing images in. We could insert an image directly, but that means we have to actually have the image file. And ideally, we should have the image file not just somewhere on our computer, but in a folder, in a directory, right in our website's directory on our computer. You just put it some random place on your computer, and when you upload this to the internet, that's not going to link back to your file on your computer. So don't do that. Also, about images, if you are putting images on your page and you have the image and it's part of your website's directory, when you upload the file, all right, we're using GitHub in these examples, but when you upload the file of the page, don't forget to also upload the images. All right, that's an easy thing to forget. Don't forget that. We used somebody else's image, so we just dragged and dropped it right into our page, and Dreamweaver gave us the entire image code for us. The only thing we changed was we shortened up the alt text, because if the image doesn't load, we didn't want to display the entire URL. We just want to display the file name, or it could be just a short name for it too. Could be a description. We could also add a tooltip description as well. We go to properties. Where's my option for that? There it is, title. For the title, we can write Declaration of Independence, hit enter, and this will give it a title. All right, now that we have that title for our image, let's come over and refresh. And that title, when you mouse over, then you get that title. Right, so you mouse over your image and you get that title. That's what the title is. The alt text is what appears when the image doesn't download. The title text is what appears as a little tooltip. Right? So we put our image in, we linked our H2 up here to the original document, although you can link to anywhere on the internet. You'll see that our link, which we didn't talk about, the format of it, it's called an A tag or an A element. That's what a link is. A stands for anchor, and it has an href, h reference. This is the value of this is going to be that full URL for wherever that file exists on the internet. If the file exists on your own website, you can do a relative URL, and you can omit this first part that has the HTTPS and the domain name and just start with this first slash. This is what you can do if it exists on your website. You can do that relative URL. It could be relative to the document. If you start at this first slash right here, it's going to be relative to your home URL of the website. Strictly speaking, you could write these links, all the kinds of links, relative to your current location. However, that's a really bad idea because if you ever move a file around, it's going to break all the links. So when you're doing relative links, you should always make them relative to the home page. That way, if you did move that page around, that relative link, because it's relative to the home page, you can't move the home page. It will always continue to work. All right, and that's going to be our example for this video. It kind of went a little long, but you can fast forward through the parts you don't care about. Thanks for watching.